Very good tonight after yesterday's radical Dem debacle on Capitol Hill, but the party of hate is in desperate straits. Radical Dems seem caught between rationalizing Robert Mueller's disastrous performance yesterday and recognizing the now obvious reality that large numbers of Democratic leaders are proven liars and have accomplished exactly nothing, while President Trump has accomplished more than any modern president in 2.5 years. Some of those radical Dems seem hell-bound now to compound the party of hate's mistakes and further commit to what has become their political suicide mission leading up to the 2020 presidential election. And just when we thought that the radical Dem activist judges were beginning to take fairness, impartiality, and justice somewhat more seriously, an Obama-appointed federal judge has blocked the Trump administration's asylum restrictions as the American people increasingly are rejecting the open border policies of the radical left. The radical Dems staying stupid, continuing their unprecedented harassment of the president. Just listen to these 2020 radical Dem hopefuls spewing what is unmistakably ignorance.
Now, President Donald Trump did everything he could to obstruct justice.
The House of Representatives should begin impeachment proceedings against this president.
He is not exonerated. Look, we know for a fact that the president did everything that he could to obstruct the Mueller investigation.
And behind closed doors, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi allegedly telling the party of hate to stand down on the subject of impeachment. Yet in public, Pelosi not completely ruling out impeachment.
If we have a case for impeachment, that's the place we will have to go. The fact that why I'd like it to be a strong case is because it's based on the facts and the law. That's what matters, not politics, not partisanship, just patriotism. If it comes to a point where the cone of silence and the obstruction of justice and the cover-up in the White House prevents us from getting that information, that will not prevent us from going forward. In fact, it's even more grounds to go forward.
She actually said that, just the facts and the law. The law that the radical Dems have been breaking for 2.5 years, trying to unseat this president, and the facts of which they have had very little interest. Joining us tonight, Congressman Matt Gaetz, member of the House Judiciary and Armed Services Committees. Congressman, good to have you with us. Your reaction as you watched the hearing unfold before you, and I know you had to do the busy work there as a member of the committee, but were you not absolutely shocked to watch the former special counsel in his performance?
Now, that was not the Robert Mueller I was expecting. And we take ourselves back to just the beginning of the week. Adam Schiff said that Robert Mueller would be breathing life into the Mueller report. The reality was he ended up sucking all of the life out of the impeachment movement. And I think we heard the death rattle for impeachment at the conclusion of Robert Mueller's testimony before our committees. And Lou, even before Robert Mueller testified, more Americans thought that his investigation was unfair than there were Americans who thought the investigation was fair. And that's even from an ABC News Morning Consult poll. And so after his testimony, I think that even more Americans have been subjected to the bias, the really bizarre choices that Robert Mueller made to only seem to go after the Trump campaign and to diminish the real collusion that I think occurred between Russians and those who were opposing President Trump's election.
Yeah, it's almost uncomfortable to think about relitigating the special counsel issue because it was a witch hunt from the very beginning. It is clear that I knew that, as I said here on this broadcast last night, that Mueller hadn't authored the report, but I thought at least he had read it. That is obviously not the case. Your thoughts?
No, There were multiple circumstances where Robert Mueller lacked a basic understanding of the facts that you've been talking on your show, and that even many of us on the Judiciary Committee have become familiar with. He didn't know who Fusion GPS was. That was the company hired to go and create this opposition research file on the president that ended up launching this investigation. But Lou, this is why the work of Attorney General Bill Barr is so important. Now we know that the president was falsely accused. We know that his reaction to that false accusation is not going to rise to any criminal culpability. But what we don't know with certainty yet are the individuals in the Obama White House and the Obama administration that really ginned up these lies in the first place. And that's why I think that the work of the Attorney General should isolate the Brennans and Clappers and Comeys and McCabe's, who were part of the deep state apparatus that launched this corrupt investigation. But here's the thing, one more point. They're not done. Like, what's crazy about this is that I think there are still some of the radical Democrats who want yet another do-over. They weren't satisfied with the written report. They weren't satisfied with Mueller. Now they want to bring in Mueller's whole team and ask them questions. So they didn't want to just turn the book into a movie. Now they want to recast the movie with new cast members.
Well, they're far from having a movie. They're very far from having a plot that, other than the radical Dems, the Democrats, have become the party of hate. And they have carried out efforts over the course of 3 years to stop the candidacy of Donald Trump and then try to overthrow his presidency. I'm very leery, Congressman, of the expression do-over. I'm very leery of the expression hoax, because this was an outright effort to stop Donald Trump in his tracks and to subvert the will of the American people and this president. These are not people, and I have to give you a compliment, and the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee. That is the first hearing, and you're not going to like how I phrased this compliment. It is the first hearing that I watched in which the Republicans were prepared to take on the issues and the man in front of them as they attacked this president. And I've got to tell you, it was good to see.
It was the most preparation that our team has done for any hearing. I credit our ranking member, Doug Collins, for bringing the team together, forcing us to really be precise in our questions, to make sure we were well researched. What we could not have prepared for was how poorly Robert Mueller performed in the response to our questions, his lack of understanding, his poor memory, and then
this
also,
is the same guy, though, Congressman, and I understand your empathy, but this is, after all, the same man who yesterday was calling before those two committees, the Intelligence Committee and yours, Judiciary, calling the president names. He was still an agent of hate, and working against the interest of both the nation and this president.
Well, yeah, Robert Mueller took this job knowing that this was a rotten deal. So I don't have great sympathy for him, but I think it demonstrated a dynamic where there really are no facts. There was never any evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. And what's so crazy to the average American watching all this unfold is that instead of evaluating how this corrupt investigation began, you've got Democrats who want to tweeze through the president's response to being falsely accused of something that was impairing his ability to lead the free world. That is really what should bother all Americans, and cleaning up the corruption at the deep state is really central to our focus going forward.
Yeah. The deep state, in this instance, amounts to whatever residue there is of the radical Dems and the radical left and the Democratic Party within the Justice Department and the FBI, who are politically corrupt to the bone and who have to be removed from wherever they are within the Justice Department and the FBI, because that job, as you are pointing out, is a long way from done.
Certainly.
Congressman, you get the last word here.
Well, I'm deeply disappointed in the budget deal that Republicans and Democrats joined in passing right now. It will suck $1 trillion this next year out of the American economy to fund the largesses of government, and Republicans will pay for this. We cannot continue to be the party of massive spending, and I'm deeply disappointed that we didn't fight harder for spending cuts. I hope we do better when we come back in the fall.
Well, I'd just like to remind you, you didn't do better when Paul Ryan was Speaker. and passed a $1.3 trillion omnibus bill. I hate to be...
no, you're right. You're right.
Well,
we
I know
have
I'm
failed
right.
to keep
I
our
just
promises.
hate to have to remind everyone of the failures of both parties.
Yeah, and frankly, we need a new generation of leaders in the Congress who will actually stand up for hardworking American taxpayers and American families who have to make choices at the kitchen table at the end of every month regarding a financial budget. And here in Washington, we just continue to pass the buck to the next generation. History will judge us harshly for this.
Well, history will, and polling has. The numbers, the approval numbers for the United States Congress and Senate are, well, disastrous. Congressman, great to see you. We'll end on that happy note. Congressman Matt Gaetz,
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Up next, a Republican congressman slamming a big bank for bending to the demands of social justice warriors, putting the American people at risk, ignoring law, regulations, traditions, and oh yes, good common sense. And why are some in the Trump administration diminishing Google's work with the PLA, the Communist Party, and the military of Communist China? There seems to be some confusion here. We'll try to straighten that out next. We'll be taking that up. Thanks, CEO William Rogers. The congressman called Rogers out yesterday for denying business for private detention centers who want to bank with them due to the whims of demonstrators and protesters.
Representative, we're not taking a social position.
You are taking a social position when you say you won't bank detention facilities.
Representative, we consider a variety of different factors in reaching those conclusions related to the status of that business, the credit worthiness, survivability of those businesses.
So a contract with the U.S. government, you don't seem to be a good risk. Come on.
Representative,
you're making a social policy judgment. And you say, no, I'm not gonna fund a detention facility that might hold kids before we can find an adult to take the child. That's opposed to our social policy. Or I don't know who's coming in. Are they terrorists? Are they drug dealers? Are they gang members? We don't want America to hold them. We want them released in our community. That's the position of your bank. If you abide by the law, we'll bank you if you're a good risk. You go through the banking procedures, the risk analysis, and if you follow the law, you can do business with us. And I think that's the right model. And you should bank, Mr. Rogers, everyone who follows the law.
Sean Duffy, way to go, Congressman. SunTrust, not so good. SunTrust, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, put them on the list. They've cut ties to private detention facilities, refusing to bank them. That's right. Social justice banking. Absolutely outrageous. Good for Congressman Duffy, and hopefully the president, the Republican Party, will stand up and force those highly regulated businesses, by the way, to follow the law and to make sense. Jeffrey Epstein has been placed on suicide watch after he was found unconscious in his New York federal jail cell. Epstein was found Tuesday morning in the fetal position, reportedly. Marks were on his neck. Some say he attempted suicide. Others think he may have been trying to get a transfer out of the jail. There is no word on whether or not there were others in the cell, whether he was alone, whether he had a belt, or how those marks could have gotten there. There are a lot of questions. A spokesperson for the U.S. Bureau of Prisons has confirmed Epstein is being held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center. Well, joining us tonight, former Reagan White House political director, Republican strategist, Fox Business political analyst, and Great American Ed Rollins. First, let's start with Epstein. What in the world are the federal authorities doing? Here is potentially the most explosive witness against some of the most powerful names in this country. And suddenly they don't know whether he had a belt in the cell, whether he was in there with other characters. Why would he not already be on protective watch?
I can't understand that. I mean, obviously he's not been found guilty of anything. I do think he's guilty of numerous crimes
He's a sexual predator, a child molester. I mean, all of that.
I say all of that.
So, I mean, what crime do you want us to talk about?
I'm not. Please understand. I'm not arguing for the benefit, but he's there on because they didn't give him bail. So you'd think they'd have him on a watch. You'd think because of his friendships and what have you that someone would have made sure that he's a potential valuable asset in addition to being a scumbag in the sense of who he knew, who he was playing games with. So.
Yeah, it's stunning. Were you shocked that they did not have him on protective watch?
I was very shocked. You know,
well, let's turn to, first of all, the budget. We heard Congressman Matt Gaetz say that he was very upset with the Republican Party. The Republican Party, I mean, both parties are bragging about bipartisanship. $320 billion. You know, here goes the deficit. Here goes the national debt higher, and we don't even know what's in the thing.
Well, we won't know. They'll be adding to it here and there and what have you. You know, at the end of the day, there were 218 Democrats voted for it or more, and they should have let just the Democrats carry because it's their bill. And I think at the end of the day, it's sort of all the promises Republicans have made over the years are now irrelevant. The Tea Party premises are no more. Republicans always want to do what Democrats do for 80%, 90% of the cost. In this particular case,
you know, you're a loyal Republican partisan. Both parties are so screwed up on the budget. It's not even. It is really
because
fragile.
I'm a Republican partisan. I'm more frustrated when my own side fails miserably than I am on the other side.
Let's listen to Rachel Maddow. Something we don't often do on this broadcast, but if you want to see how desperate the left-wing media is right now, trying to explain how they have lied and lied and lied to their audiences, and the Republican Party has only barely started to catch up in correcting the record. Here's Rachel Maddow last night sharing her pain.
I mean, I know that the Trump White House and conservative media are trying to like chin up tonight and make it seem like they had a great day today. Everything was fine. Nobody died. They did not have a great day today.
Says Rachel Maddow. She's the one who needs a chin up, for crying out loud.
Well,
what do you think?
They were the ones crying all day yesterday. Today they're basically saying we have to have million vote protests in the Capitol. We have to do like Puerto Rico did. We have to get this president out of office.
Mark my words, they couldn't raise 1 million people to demonstrate.
That's what they're advocating all day today. The bottom line is, and my premise from the beginning is,
look at those ratings.
They think they want to impeach the president. Have at it. They're going to pay a heavy price for it, and they probably will lose the House of Representatives over it. And that's why Pelosi has got her thumb in the.
Well, they stole it, so the Republicans ought to get it back fair and square, even if they have to steal it.
I don't care how we get it back. We just as long as we get it back. And my sense is that they need to protect this president. They have now taken shots at this president for 2.5 years.
Let me turn to this administration. We got Mnuchin with coming out in the Journal in an op-ed talking about everything's just fine with Google and China, even as Google is working with China, its military, to apply artificial intelligence, something that it refuses to do with the United States. And Mnuchin saying the president and I have checked out Google and China, and we say it's fine.
That means
this is nuts.
That means he turned on his iPad and looked at Google, something on Google. The truth of the matter is the Chinese forever have always, it's not a free enterprise system like we have.
It's a communist system, for crying out loud.
Every single thing that they do. But I think Mnuchin, these guys all think of it as Wall Street. They all think of it
as money.
They think of it as money.
What's his motivation here? I mean, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying this is exactly wrong. Well, Google, China, and the refusal to work with the U.S. military. And then you have this Treasury Secretary out of his lane talking about national security.
Every single thing that goes on in China is related to their military. The military is what holds it all in place. Every single business deal is run by the military. They take whatever it is that they want. And this, Gordon Chang has a great piece on it, who knows as much about this, one of your great guests here. But
he'll be with us here tomorrow night.
But the reality is Mnuchin doesn't understand what they're doing to him, and he's penalizing the American public.
Ed Rollins, as always, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Europe, in the midst of a record-breaking heat wave, Cities like Paris today, there are no cities like Paris, but you know what I mean, hitting a record 108 degrees Fahrenheit. That heat also affecting infrastructure across Europe. And that we're talking about everything from roads to nuclear reactors. Two reactors at a power plant in France had to shut down because the cooling water they were using was too hot. And trains running slower in the UK, heat damaging the rails. They had to slow down to avoid derailment. Up next, the dramatic arrest of U.S. Marines at one of the country's largest military bases. Also, Google's ties to China. They don't seem to worry. Mnuchin, anybody else concerned? Anybody want to really examine carefully why the Treasury Secretary going to trade talks in Shanghai next week with the Chinese is so thrilled that Google has no problem turning all of its potential and IP into a project. It's busted as they stood in formation. They face charges of smuggling drugs and human trafficking as well. The Marine Corps says an additional 8 Marines were taken aside to be questioned further on their possible involvement in the drug offenses that are under investigation and related to the arrest. Today's action came after information was gained from the arrest of 2 other Marines earlier this month, agreeing to transport 3 Mexican citizens for $8,000 across the border. Breaking news now. U.S. officials confirmed tonight that Iran test-fired a medium-range ballistic missile Wednesday night. The missile traveled over 600 miles from southern Iran to an area near Tehran. And North Korea, not to be outdone, also launching 2 new types of short-range ballistic missiles early yesterday morning. The first missile traveled nearly 300 miles, the second traveled 430 miles, and all of that, of course, just within range of South Korea. Well, joining us now, Christian Whiten, Senior Fellow at the Center for the National Interest, former State Department Senior Advisor in the Trump and George W. Bush administrations. Sebastian Gorka, host of Salem Radio's America First broadcast and author and former strategist to President Trump. Good to have you both here. Let me start, Christian, with first your reaction to those missiles from Tehran, those missiles from North Korea.
Both regimes are acting up. You know, Iran would very much like to go back to holding the United States under the threat of nuclear blackmail. The president has blown past that by getting us out of the Iran deal and has also started with his new Secretary of Defense, newly confirmed, to say that we will be protecting U.S. tankers moving through the Persian Gulf, but not saying that we're going to do that for the world. So I think a very important step in the Middle East. With North Korea, the same situation. This is what the regime does. It's acting out. You know, it's not a big deal in the sense that it's not a nuclear test or a long-range ICBM test.
Well, in both instances, North Korea and Iran are partners, and they are allies, and they are creating problems. Obviously, China, the principal sponsor of North Korea, Seb, is now helping them launch missiles. Also, they seem to have a spokesperson in our Treasury Secretary who is willing to impart the knowledge that he and the president, as he put it, have checked into Google's operations in China and gives them a clean bill of health, even as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, even as we know from our intelligence services, are deeply concerned, and the U.S. military in particular, outraged that Google will not work with them on AI.
Yeah, I'm not sure Secretary Mnuchin is reading or was reading the same reports that I was reading when I was in the White House. Reports which helped us convince the president that China isn't just another player. They are, of course, a very, very bad actor. And this is not classified, Lou. Anybody can find out what Google is doing to facilitate and assist the dictatorial regime in Beijing. Now, I don't know if this is some kind of stunt or a feint that the secretary wants to ingratiate himself for the next round of negotiations. But at the end of the day, it's just flat wrong. Google is helping the bad guys. They are helping to censor the internet. They've moved their AI research facility to China. This is a company that used to say, as their motto, do no evil, but which today has become the supporter and the facilitator of one of the most evil regimes in the world, Lou.
Corporate America, Christian, has not really gotten the full message here. Apple, looking for tariff waivers from the White House, even as they're moving 30% of the production of MacBooks to China, for crying out loud. And again, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin seems to be a bridge between the Chamber of Commerce, Wall Street, the Koch brothers, and Silicon Valley. I mean, it is outrageous that a Treasury Secretary would be acting in this manner and speaking, by the way, invoking the president's name in an op-ed, which is just clearly nonsensical.
Well, and also there's the issue that Mnuchin has probably misled the president. As Seb pointed out, he's about to get on a plane again. He'll be in Shanghai Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week for the next round of talks. Thank God Bob Lighthizer is going there. Bob has been realistic, hawkish on China trade. But repeatedly, Mnuchin and Kudlow have gone and said that, you know, we're very close to a deal with China. They sort of have suspended disbelief with what the Chinese are all about. And if you step back, these people have not made any concessions. That Xi Jinping, despite having crowned himself emperor at the Party Congress in 2017, has real trouble. He probably cannot make a deal that will fundamentally change China. And probably what needs to happen is that tariffs need to go on the other half of trade imports from China that are not affected yet by tariffs.
Yeah, changing China, unlikely indeed, and Seb, as they are threatening military force in Hong Kong, as the demonstrations there over 2 months have risen in intensity and numbers.
Look, I have a very simple message for Steve Mnuchin. The president has not changed his mind on China. We as a nation will continue to squeeze that regime. It is feeling the pressure from the sanctions, just as Iran, just as North Korea are. These are bad actors. Just anyone can Google the One Belt, One Road strategy that China flouts publicly as their plan to replace America and become the global hegemon. Now, Christian's absolutely right. There's no daylight between chief advisors like Lighthizer and the president, and he's going to keep on doing what is best in the interests of all Americans and America first.
Yeah, and the president has taken the lead on that and deserves immense credit, not only for that, but for leading what is now a global movement to focus on balanced international trade, a reversal of where this country found itself mired for 30 some odd years. Christian White and Sebastian Gorka, great to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, unaccompanied minors pouring across the border. Judicial activism putting a hold on border security at the same time. Issued a national injunction on the president's restrictions on asylum seekers, his ruling coming on the same day that Trump-appointed federal judge Timothy Kelly rejected a similar request to block asylum restrictions. Tiger is, by the way, the same judge who blocked President Trump's policy to force asylum seekers to only seek entry at the ports of entry on the southern border. A record number of illegal immigrant children at our southern border now so far this fiscal year. 60,000 unaccompanied children have been handed over to federal care facilities since October. Still more than 2 months left in the fiscal year. The number already tops all of 2016, the record year, when more than 59,000 were turned over to DHS. Joining me now, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona. He's the co-chair of the Border Security Caucus. Congressman Biggs also serves on the House Judiciary Committee, a member of the House Freedom Caucus. And it's great to see you. Let's start with the reports that the Republicans on that Judiciary Committee knew that Robert Mueller was frail and to some degree restricted in his health. If that is indeed the case. Is that the case?
No, it's actually not the case, Lou. What we knew is what we anticipated is that he would be taciturn, that he would try to deflect and not answer questions. But we did actually a mock trial with a person in there, and we did not anticipate what we saw yesterday. That's for sure. That's for sure. I thought we saw someone who was potentially, he certainly was lethargic, and
we all saw it.
You saw it.
And what we also saw was, as I said to Congressman Matt Gaetz earlier, we saw the Republican Party for the first time that I can remember over the course of the last several years, actually prepared to go after a witness and to protect the president and to actually work together as a party. You guys have never, ever done that before.
Absolutely right. I agree with you. We haven't done it before. And what we did last, in preparation for this, everybody spent dozens of hours. You only get 5 minutes, but we spent dozens of hours working together, collaborating, divvying up areas, making sure that our research was sound, making sure that we knew where we wanted to go. And I think it paid off. You saw it. It did pay off, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Then a bipartisan effort finally realized between the Democrats and the Republicans, and now we have a bipartisan budget agreement, for crying out loud. Of all the things to agree upon, a budget-busting, debt-boosting agreement. Big government is bipartisan now, and big debt.
You're exactly right, Lou. I will say I was happy that, and I'm surprised by this actually, 2/3 of the Republicans voted no on that. So I was pleased by that. But this is going to add $320 billion in our deficit, not just the debt, but in our deficit over the next couple of years. This is a real problem for us. We're going to move to $1 trillion. And as someone has once said, there's two groups in Washington, D.C. that want to spend a lot of money, Republicans and Democrats. And we saw that on display today in that vote. And it's frustrating. It's disheartening, especially for people like myself. We took a pledge to balance the budget. We haven't seen a balanced budget in 20 years.
Let me go back to because I do want to focus on that is before time expires here, after you're talking about 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes here too, Congress. But we're much more lenient than you guys. Right. Certainly than the Democrats. Why didn't Mueller, in your opinion, answer your question about when he knew that Trump wasn't the object, target, the focus of collusion? It was sort of a stunning moment when he had acknowledged that it wasn't about collusion in his, at least that's what he claimed.
Right. Well, in my opinion, he was having a tough time processing what was going on. I mean, the reality is, you and I both know.
Do you think he's impaired?
I don't know. I just know that he wasn't at the top of his game yesterday. That's what I know. And I know that he should have been saying, he should have either been saying, look, I'm not going to get into that, or else he should have been honest with us and said, look, we knew in the fall of 2017 that there was no collusion or conspiracy going on with Russia and this administration.
It's pretty clear that was the case, though.
Exactly.
Based on the evidence.
The evidence is pretty clear. I mean, you look at the Carter Page FISA applications. They stopped doing those. They also, and Mr. Mueller has said this previously, at some point they changed their focus of investigation. Well, if you changed your focus of investigation, guess what you were doing? You were moving from the collusion effort to the obstruction of justice effort, which was equally as a big a failure.
I want to compliment another congressman as well, Congressman, and that's Sean Duffy. I mean, he went after SunTrust for its refusal to bank a company that provides the private detention centers for our Border Patrol and ICE on our southern border. And somebody had to say it. Are the Republicans going to stand up now and demonstrate again that you're united on this issue and that it won't be acceptable for business to act like that?
I sure hope so. I mean, when I found out that SunTrust was refusing to bank and do business with our
J.P. Morgan, Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, the list goes on.
Yeah, we have got to become unified as the Republicans, and I hope the administration comes in too. So if the administration and the Republicans in Congress unify, then these people who are making leftist social decisions for banking will be held accountable. And
Can you imagine a time that we thought we would hear talking about money center banks in this country, the leftists? Congressman Andy Biggs, always great to have you here. Thanks so much. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, Lou. You too.
Congressman Andy Biggs, thank you. Up next, the liberal New York Times giving radical Congresswoman Ilhan Omar a platform with which to spew bigotry and utter ignorance. We'll take up her comments and much more right after this quick break.